We operate under the assumption that catastrophe is an event, a sudden violent rupture in the fabric of order. We believe that failure announces itself with a crack, a scream, or a crash. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of systems. True catastrophe is rarely an event, it is a process. It is a slow, silent accumulation of small permissions. It is a drift. The most dangerous failures do not occur because a boundary was crossed inadvertently. They occur because the boundary was moved, inch by inch, by the very people responsible for guarding it. The human mind is ill-equipped to process gradual change. We are wired to detect contrast, to react to the predator in the grass or the sudden drop in temperature. We are not wired to detect the creeping obsolescence of a safety standard. When a deviation from the norm occurs and no disaster follows, the brain does not record a near miss, it records a success. It learns that the boundary was conservative, that the rule was flexible, and that the expert is capable of navigating the gray zone. This is the seed of the drift.
Visualize a subject at the apex of their competency, a chief structural engineer, a veteran pilot, or a portfolio manager responsible for billions in assets. They are not reckless. They are the definition of prudent. They have years of data, heuristics, and experience that form a protective shell around their decision-making. They know the manual better than the people who wrote it. Consequently, they believe they know which rules are immutable laws of physics and which are merely bureaucratic suggestions.
This subject encounters a minor anomaly, a sensor reading that is slightly out of tolerance, a financial leverage ratio that exceeds the model's recommendation by a fraction, a skipped step in a pre-flight checklist due to time constraints. They proceed. The system holds. The bridge does not collapse. The market does not crash. The plane lands. In this moment, the subject has not just survived a risk, they have learned a dangerous lesson. They have learned that the system is more robust than the warnings imply. They have empirically proven that the red line is actually a gradient.
The mechanism driving this behavior is known as the normalization of deviance. It is not an act of negligence, but a social and psychological adaptation to pressure. In a high-performance environment, efficiency is the currency of competence. The expert who can bypass a redundant safety check to deliver a result faster is often rewarded, not reprimanded. Over time, the deviation from the standard becomes the standard. The anomaly is no longer an anomaly, it is simply how we do things here. This transformation of the baseline is insidious because it feels like mastery. The subject believes they are optimizing a rigid system. They view the original safety margins as inefficiencies designed for the lowest common denominator, the novice. Since they are not novices, they grant themselves an exemption. They believe their expertise acts as a buffer, allowing them to operate closer to the edge without falling over. They do not realize that the edge itself is crumbling under the weight of their confidence.
The first mechanism of this breakdown is the outcome bias loop. This is the logical fallacy where the quality of a decision is judged solely by its result. If the subject ignores a warning sign and nothing bad happens, the brain categorizes the decision to ignore the warning as correct. This creates a positive feedback loop. Each successful violation of the rule reinforces the behavior. The silence of the system is misinterpreted as approval. The lack of an explosion is taken as proof of safety. The subject begins to view the warnings themselves as the error, treating alarms as noise to be silenced rather than signals to be heeded. The second mechanism is the desensitization to latent pathogens. In every complex system, there are hidden flaws, latent pathogens that lie dormant. These flaws only become active when specific conditions align. The expert, having operated the system for years without incident, begins to believe these pathogens do not exist. They mistake luck for structural integrity. The visual indicators of risk lose their emotional potency. A warning light that has been blinking for a month without consequence eventually becomes part of the background scenery. The subject stops seeing the light. They only see the room. The third mechanism is the social proof of silence. In a team of experts, the drift is often collective. If the senior leader accepts a deviation, say flying through weather that is technically below minimums, the junior members recalibrate their own internal risk meters. They look to the authority figure to define what is dangerous. If the authority figure remains calm and proceeds, the group assumes the risk is managed. Silence becomes a reinforcing agent. No one speaks up because everyone assumes that if it were truly dangerous, someone else would have spoken up already. This creates a consensus of blindness. The fourth mechanism is the illusion of control via micromanagement. As the subject drifts further from the established safety baseline, they often compensate by becoming hyper-obsessed with minor details. They believe that if they control the small variables with absolute precision, they can mitigate the massive structural risk they have introduced. They obsess over the font size in the report while ignoring the fact that the data in the report indicates a systemic collapse. This micromanagement serves as a psychological sedative. It gives the sensation of control in a situation that has already become uncontrollable. The moment of no return is not when the catastrophe happens. It is the moment the deviation is codified into procedure. It is the day the team stops asking, "Is this safe?" and starts asking, "Can we get away with this again?" The extraordinary becomes the mundane. The practice of launching the shuttle in temperatures slightly below the limit becomes the practice of launching in freezing conditions. The practice of extending the loan slightly beyond the collateral becomes the practice of unsecured lending. The new baseline is set. The history of the safe past is now the justification for the dangerous future. The uncomfortable truth is that experience is a double-edged sword. While it provides the skills to solve problems, it also provides the confidence to ignore them. The novice follows the rules because they are afraid. The expert breaks the rules because they are not. In this context, fear is a functional component of survival. When you eliminate fear through the accumulation of successful risks, you eliminate the only barrier between yourself and the chaotic reality of the world. You are not managing risk, you are merely accumulating probability, and probability eventually always reverts to the mean. We look at the wreckage of a space shuttle, a financial firm, or a life, and we ask, how did they miss the signs? We assume they were asleep at the wheel, but they were wide awake. They were watching every gauge, measuring every metric, and optimizing every variable. They simply forgot where the road ended and the cliff began. They didn't fall because they stopped paying attention. They fell because they convinced themselves that gravity didn't apply to them.